Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Sarah Lebrat. Today's video is going to be another Q&A. This is part 2 because I asked you guys for questions here on YouTube in the community tab and over on Instagram and got way too many responses for just one video. And so this is part 2 of my Q&A that continues on from last week's video. If you have not seen part 1 of this yet, it will be linked down in the description box and in the cards at the end of this video if you want to check that out after this. You don't need to watch them in any particular order. I'm just answering a bunch of the questions that I was asked. If you go on to enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a big thumbs up because that really supports my channel by telling the YouTube algorithm that you liked my video and that someone else might too. And if you're new here and like this video and want to see more like it from me, make sure you subscribe. And now without further ado, let's get into it. Have you ever worked in other mediums, plays for example, or screenwriting? I dropped out of my screenwriting class in college, but I dropped out of that class so that I could be in a poetry writing class that only had 1 hour available during that semester, but it sounded so much more interesting than the screenwriting class. So I have not done any screenwriting other than one very, very brief attempt that I think lasted like a page and a half. That was more just like for fun. I have not ever written a play. Who knows if I ever will. I think that it would be cool to try my hand again at screenwriting, but I would definitely need to take a class on it or something to learn more about it. But I like the concept of being proficient in multiple kinds of storytelling and forms of writing. But I would say that the one that I've played around with the most that is not novels would probably be poetry. Do you have a method for naming characters? Yes. Babynames.com or any other baby naming website that is just basically a database of names, and depending on the website you can search for meanings, you can search for length. Sometimes you can look at names by what they start with or what they sound like. You can search for names based on origin if you're looking for a certain like kind of name. These websites are miraculous and such a lifesaver as a writer because naming characters is so hard, but it's so easy to access these websites and then look at these databases of names and come up with some really good stuff. I typically have to get to know my characters though before I can actually name them, which has caused me some issues in the past, and several of my characters in draft 4 of the book that I'm currently working on still don't have names because I only named the really main characters, and I'm still working on naming more subtle side characters, which is fun and a pain in the butt. Yep. Since you're a pantser, did you have a lot of plot holes in your first draft of Project DE? Yes, but I'm not sure it's because I am a pantser. I'm sure that played into it a little bit, but I also wrote the first draft of Project DE over a span of 3.5 years while I was in college, and that definitely did not work in my favor. And I think the biggest problem with that was the inconsistency. And by inconsistency, I mean growth as a writer as I was writing it, because the story became inconsistent because I would like take the story in different directions, and my writing would be different because I was growing as a writer and I was getting a lot better, but then it was making the stuff that I had originally wrote look worse basically. So I think the main plot holes in draft 1 of Project DE were because of how long it took me to write it, not necessarily because I'm a pantser. But again, I'm sure that had a part to play. What is your go-to system for working out plot holes? I really think that the best thing that I've done for trying to figure out and work through plot holes so far is after a draft is done, going through, reading through it, and then making notes on where there are inconsistencies and how I could potentially change those inconsistencies, but not touching the document, making those notes in a notebook or something that's outside of the document so that you're not actually changing anything while you're going through. That way you're not distracted by making line edits or anything, and you're really focused on the developmental edits, or the bigger picture edits as I called them when I was working on draft 2 and 3, and then basically using that information that you get from that process to inform your next draft and where your story needs help and what chapters you might just need to completely rewrite in order to fix these said plot holes. What's been your favorite project to work on so far? This is kind of like asking me to pick a favorite child, which is hard because I feel like whichever project I'm working on while I'm working on it is my favorite. So the book that I wrote in high school, which I call LRF, which is again an abbreviation of the original title that no longer applies, that one was my absolute favorite, and one of the characters in that story was the character that I needed to be writing at that point in time. I still love her. I want to get back to working with her. And then when I was was working on Project DE. Project DE was my favorite because I loved the story and I loved the lore and I loved the world building and the world itself and the magic system and the religious system and the character cast and all of it. And so then DE was my favorite. And then when I sent DE out to beta readers and I decided that I wanted to start something new in March, when Project DE was with beta readers being beta read, I started a science fiction story that I call CBH, which is again an abbreviation of the original title. That one was my favorite while I was working on it, but I think that a huge part of that one is that I've been thinking about that story for so long that the fact that I finally got the opportunity to write it and that I wrote 50,000 words of it in 32 days so quickly, I think that just made me love the story so much because it felt so ready to be told. And I had been working on Project DE for so long that it was so much fun to get to start something new. In what way have you grown most as a writer? When I first got this question, I had to really think about it because I wasn't entirely sure, because I know that I've grown, which is amazing, and we all have from where we've started. But it took me a while to figure out how I wanted to actually answer this question. But I think the answer I finally landed on was my consistency. I just said that I wrote the first draft of Project DE in 3.5 years, but I really think that the consistency that I'm putting into my stories now, mostly because I'm out of school and I have much more time and creative energy to put towards my creative projects, is helping me a lot. Being in school and trying to write a book is awful. It is so hard to remain consistent. It is so hard to remain motivated because school is so crushing and you have to write so many things for school, and none of the things that you have to write for school were fun. At least in my case, I didn't think they were. And so I think that graduating and getting out of school has been incredibly helpful for me. And in that, I have become a much more consistent writer and I'm much more dedicated to my craft and making my writing better. Favorite recipe? I love this question, but I definitely had to look it up because I did not know who it was by or what it was called. But it is the hazelnut paleo brownies by Food Faith Fitness. There will be a link in the description box below. I have made several changes to this recipe when I personally make it because I'm vegan, but everyone that I've made it for freaking loves them. And so I think it's very worth it. I use almond flour because it's easier to find than hazelnut flour. I use vegan butter. I use brown sugar if I don't have any coconut sugar on hand. It works the exact same and tastes slightly less healthy. So if that's what you're going for, do that. And instead of an egg, I use a flax egg, which is 1 tablespoon of ground up flax with 2 tablespoons of water. And it's a great egg replacer if you don't like eating eggs. And then instead of making it in a cast iron skillet, because I do not have one, I just split it up into 4 different small ramekins and then put an extra chocolate chunk in the center, and I just kind of press it down so that it melts in the oven, and you take it out, and everyone that I've made it for freaking loves it. I highly recommend you give it a shot if you're interested in cooking. Cats or dogs? Definitely dogs. The bigger the better. Favorite tea? My favorite tea is chamomile tea. I love the ones that are pretty much just the flowers that bloom when you put them in hot water. Those are my favorite. Favorite book? My favorite book is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. It is just the perfect combination of characters that you've gotten to know separately coming together. Absolutely amazing. Will want to reread that again shortly in the future because it is so good. Favorite trope? My favorite trope is definitely the enemies to lovers trope in any romance or fantasy romance story. This segment is brought to you by the leg of my tripod and this leg that is currently tangled up in my hair. Excellent, let's continue. How is your reading for the year going? That is a great question and I'm not entirely sure. Let's pull up Goodreads. I set up a good, better, best goal system for this goal for my year. I believe my good goal was to read 6 books. My better goal was to read 12 and my best goal was to read 20. So in reality, I was shooting for 20, if not over 20, because I wanted my goal to be somewhat realistic. I have currently read 10 books so far this year and we are in the 8th month. That does mean that I'm about 4 books behind, but I am currently reading A Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout and Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I'm loving both of them. I just need to finish them. That's the biggest dilemma here, and that's what I need to focus on. And then hopefully finishing those books will give me more momentum so that I can finish more books so that I can hit my goal for 20 for the year. What is the best thing you can do to improve your writing quickly? Honestly, if you have tried self-editing and are still struggling with this, I would highly recommend having someone else look at your work. This can be a family member or a friend or a teacher, basically anyone that you trust with your story to give you constructive criticism. Yes, friends and family members might only say good things about it, but if you have another writing friend that can give you legitimate feedback on it, that would be amazing, because they will help you very quickly figure out what needs help and what is good. And then you can kind of go from there and take that advice and improve your writing moving forward. That was a huge revelation to me in college, doing writing workshops in my creative writing classes, and recently when I sent out my Project DE to beta readers. That was hugely insightful for me to be able to get that kind of feedback back from them. So I think that is one of the best ways. If you've already tried self-editing and cutting out certain words and trying to improve and you're still stuck, that's what I would recommend. What part of the writing process do you enjoy the most? World building and pantsing my first draft. I know that I've talked a lot about this before, so I don't know really how much detail I should go into. World building is so much fun though, and I think that that is so cool. However, I get very, very sucked up into the world building, so if I can actually start a rough draft, that is a huge win. And then basically getting to do a discovery draft where you write the first novel as a pantser is so much fun, because you're building the world, you're learning the story, you're meeting the characters. It's just such a fun exploratory process. I got another 2 questions that kind of go hand in hand, and one of them is, what is your job? I am a flight coordinator for an airline, which means that I basically do all of the software planning for flights to happen so that the pilots can do their job and just fly the planes. I've now had this job for about 8 months and I'm still loving it, and I'm loving all of the time and freedom that it gives me to do the things that I really want to do, which include writing and hiking, which is why I moved out to the mountains, because the job is fully remote, so I get to work from my apartment, which means that I even get to save time because there is no commute, which is awesome. And then the question that kind of ties into that is, how do you stay motivated to write during or after work? I would say that I am in a very lucky position where I do not feel incredibly burned out from my job, because it does not take any creative expression. I used to be in marketing, and that was a lot harder to then come home at the end of the day after I had been creative at work to then spend creative energy on my own projects, which is kind of why I took a step back from marketing for this job, so that I could focus on my own creative projects and see what I could make those into and focus a little bit more on that instead of being creative for someone else. However, how do I stay motivated after work? That's a great question. I have learned what time of day I write best, and that is after 11 p.m. So I just try to book myself writing time after 11 p.m. Often anywhere from like 11 to 2, I will try to sit down and write, because I know that's when I am most productive in my creative energy, and that's when I want to get a lot of writing done. And so knowing when I write the best and being able to book myself writing time within that time is amazingly helpful. All right, that's gonna be it from me today, you guys. Thank you so much for watching this Q&A. If you missed part 1 and want to go watch that now, I will leave that linked up here. But thank you guys so much for watching. This is just a very friendly reminder to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you guys next Monday with another video. Bye.